EA is one of the largest game companies in the world. They've also been rated the worst company in the US twice. Most gamers hate them. Well, EA isn't going anywhere, and I'm going to tell you why. Let me read you a quote about EA. The rating would not let me choose below 0 the worst purchase that I've ever made on Amazon, and I would warn anyone to beware. I paid for the digital code, and it said sorry, wrong quote. Some of EA's games are based on premises that have already been explored by other companies, but even when this is the case, EA's distinctive style brings new life to the most overexploited of ideas. Now, this sounds like something Kotaku might write about EA today, but this was written back in 1987. I mean, I hear the dinosaurs were the primary game buyers back then. EA is one of the oldest companies in gaming. They started in 1982. Most of the game studios that started back then, like Epix or Infocom or Activision, were formed by passionate groups of game developers eager to make their mark on the world and pioneer the games industry. EA was formed by Trip Hawkins, who was a marketing guy from Apple, who thought that the games business was profitable. So he formed a publisher, not a game studio. They basically started out exactly where they are right now. To be honest, it looked like Trip Hawkins picked a bad time to start a game publisher, because 1 year after EA formed, in 1983, the video game crash happened. It's hard to even wrap your mind around the ideas that video games would ever just disappear, but it was looking like it back in 83. Over the course of 2 years, game sales dropped from 3.2 billion to 100 million.
What?
Like, look at this. I tried to visualize how much of a reduction that is, but you can barely even see the 100 million on the graph. The crash happened because of, you know what? Let's just keep it real simple. Developers flooded the game market with buggy games that no one wanted, which sounds a little familiar, but people stopped buying them and stores stopped carrying them. Most of the games industry went out of business. So how did EA make it? They moved on from console games, not from video games as a whole, but from Atari. And I mean, I could see why people stopped buying Ataris because, I mean, look at this. This barely qualifies as a game. EA started making PC games. Their first big game was Deluxe Paint. I mean, I guess it's not really a game, but it sold really well. Overall, they just approached games differently than other people did at the time. Back then, EA really pushed the games they published as art. Their game boxes looked like they were styled like album artwork, and they published ads showing off their developers and even calling them artists. And that just wasn't done at the time. And they got good developers because they were willing to share profits with them. So you can see how EA survived for this long. It's from their business-minded approach and from their emphasis on their developers and on the art of game development. Except it's not that simple. I do have one simple request for you though. Please subscribe to the channel. If you're enjoying the video, subscribe. The business-minded approach definitely has something to do with their success, and it's a contributing factor today. But they don't do the same thing with developers anymore. These days they've been sued a few times by developers over poor work environments and overwork and bad pay. You also don't see any ads showing off the people making the games. You get ads for a generic, big-budget EA game showing the gameplay. And EA games are maybe the furthest thing you would call from art. This used to be a unique edge for them, but it's not what they do now. One thing they do now, okay, sorry, that sounded terrible. One thing they keep up with now is sports games. Everybody loves the sports games. They sell amazingly every single year. You look at the top of the charts for game sales every year, and what do you see? You see a new Madden, and a new FIFA, or whatever they call FIFA now. They make a mint on sports games, and they've been doing that for a long time. Even back in the 80s, they were known as a sports game company. The first big one they made is also the one you guys probably know the best, Madden. They hired out John Madden, who I hear was a famous coach or something, but I'll be honest, I only know him from the video game. It's interesting because they didn't just use Madden as a mascot. They actually brought him in to help make the games. Initially, they wanted to get Joe Montana, but he'd already signed a deal with Atari, so I mean, rip him. They also initially wanted to make the game be something simple that ran well on crappy PCs. So it was going to be some like arcadey 6-on-6 football game that didn't match the real rules of the game. But when Madden saw it, he said, nah, that's not real. It got to be like real football. And they went back and forth. We don't need to get into the details of football simulation, but the important part is that Madden, the guy, wanted the game with his name to be like real football. It took EA a lot longer to make the game, and it was only an okay success. Like, not great, just okay. They had to fight a bloody battle for over a decade with other competing football games. I mean, shout out to games like, you know, Joe Montana football or Game Day. Shout out you if you know those. Eventually, though, they became the king of football games, and now they print money. They're also the king of football games like the other one, but I'm not European, and statistically, neither are you, so I think we could just leave it at that. EA Sports, it's in the game, was a pillar for early EA, and it's a pillar that they stand on today. Kinda. I mean, it's not wrong. It's just that sports games are not the only thing that keep EA afloat. They have Madden and FIFA or FC or whatever it is, but they also have The Sims and Battlefield and games like Dead Space and Need for Speed and Star Wars Jedi Survivor. These games all sell really well too, and they don't have anything in common with sports games, so they've clearly figured out more than just sports games. Plus, there's a difference between the people who would buy Jedi Survivor and the people who buy Madden. Like, they're both gamers, but they're very different types of gamers. And yet EA knows how to be relevant to both of them, even while they're being hated by both of them in a lot of cases. Shout out to sports gamers because they're high tier in their ability to hate on games that they buy every year.
I think people have finally caught up. I think even the most casual Madden buyers have learned Madden sucks.
Y'all are an inspiration for all of the game haters who hate on the games that they play. But anyway, to find out why EA won't be going anywhere, we have to look at what all these games have in common. Maybe their success came from their past history of creativity and their faithfulness to, like, modeling reality. They did that from day one with Madden, and over time became the only football game around. It's a perfect simulation of the game, and oh. Oof. Ah. Oh. Okay, they kind of stopped doing the part about perfect simulation a long time ago. But you can look at games like Battlefield, Battlefield 1. With that game, they faithfully recreated World War I, and they did a lot for the shooter genre. And then after that, they followed it up with, oh, no. The next one, they had a woman, the robo arm, fighting in the front lines of World War II. And then they went to the future. Okay, I think we can drop the premise that faithfulness to reality has anything to do with it. Oh, I got it. EA's dominance now comes from their willingness to buy everyone else out of the market. With sports games, Madden and FIFA are so big because they pay the licenses to use the real players. They pay the licenses to use things like Star Wars too. Everyone wants to play as Patrick Mahomes and as the Cowboys, to play as Luke Skywalker. Although, I mean, I guess you kind of can't play as Luke Skywalker these days. But they also want to play as, like, Messi and Mbappe. Is that how you say it?
Mbappe.
Is that how you say his name? Well, this doesn't really make sense either because they have a ton of games with their own original IP. Now, yeah, having a sports license is really important. But this year, they had to stop calling the soccer games FIFA and move on to calling them FC because they didn't want to license the name FIFA. And guess what? It still sold amazing. Okay, let's go back to what they did in the beginning. It could just be that EA is really good at picking out other people who know how to make good games and then buying their studios. This is definitely part of their strategy. It happened when they bought DICE, who makes Battlefield for them. It happened when they bought Respawn, who made Apex Legends. They even bought out the company that made Madden for them. They know how to find and acquire winners. That's true, but it's not really what's keeping them around. I only talked about the winners. There's also a graveyard of companies that EA bought and then shut down, like Visceral Games, who made Dead Space. Gone now. Westwood Studios created Command & Conquer. Dust. Pandemic Studios, who made the old Star Wars Battlefield games. The list goes on and on. Like, there is a list. Point is, EA buys a lot of studios, and they just keep the ones that work and sell the rest. That's a pretty common strategy. It doesn't really set EA apart. What are they doing with the studios that end up working out? There are tons of other publishers that EA has outlasted. What has EA done to win? Well, EA is really good at one thing: finding formulas. The truth is that people like the same game. Now, if you can make a game that's new that they like, they'll love it. But players are more likely to buy a game that they already know that they'll like. Now, this is true everywhere, like in movies and TV and books. It really doesn't matter. EA is just really good at putting together a formula for a game that they can repeat over and over again. And it's not just one formula. Like, Ubisoft knows how to make about 1.5 games, and one of those is Assassin's Creed. So you have Assassin's Creed, and modern-day Assassin's Creed, and modern-day Assassin's Creed again with hacking, and modern-day Assassin's Creed, but for some reason they called it Ghost Recon, etc., etc. EA knows how to make game formulas in general. So Battlefield games all play the same. There's been small variations over the course of 30 years from the original. The same happened with Madden, same happened with FIFA. Neither of those games play exactly like the originals did. The variations happened slowly over time, so people still wanted to play them, and they felt a little fresh every year. Not everybody knows how to do this. EA is better than almost everyone at creating and following formulas. Like, the Final Fantasy series doesn't really have a formula, and its games are all over the place in terms of, like, scores and sales. Mortal Kombat, for example, is doing well now, but it had about a decade of failure before now. Capcom has completely forgotten how to make half of their game series, so good luck ever seeing another Mega Man game. But EA knows how to create and stick to formulas. And me, I like new games. I think that if you took the most creative indie games in the last 3 years, we would see more creative games than EA's made in the last 20. Most EA games are super bland to me. Yet, EA's doing great. And I have to admit, I like some of their games too. Apex got me. That was new and creative. And so now, it's sitting in live service jail, where it'll be updated until either Jesus comes back or people get sick of it. Whichever one comes first. If you look at most of the companies that make up big gaming, like EA, Microsoft, Sony, Activision's owned by Microsoft now, but still, it's Ubisoft, Take-Two, Bandai Namco. They're all good at turning successful games into a formula to be repeated with very little variation. Nintendo is kind of an exception, but still, the last new IP Nintendo created was ARMS. Oof. Whatever you think about them, EA isn't going anywhere. Now, they understand how to make formulaic games that gamers can't stop playing. They're the Wendy's of gaming, and it doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon. Thanks for watching.